Howdy y'all, this is Red Wolf. This is right on the back of doing my Shamshear review. And as I mentioned in that review, you get to see some of the best and some of the worst of cold steel kind of in one package. And at this point I have owned or handled at least 15 cold steel sword offerings, and I've got some observations on, or at least my opinion on, cold steel's famous balance issue, where all their stuff is real forward heavy and some of the grip designs are a little weird. And this is going to be from a background in living history, historical martial arts, and weapon making design and study in that kind of museum department. I think that the problem is twofold. The first one is going to be manufacturing. These swords are a lot cheaper because they're not distal tapered. Historically, these would be, you know, this fat right here, and probably thinner than they are at the tip. And that's because they start off with a bar or a piece of round stock, and they're hammering it, and they're starting with a bar this long and stretching it into a sword. And with these, you're probably going to be starting with a giant sheet of metal and cutting it out and reshaping it from there. And so you get any distal tapering in these is probably going to be put in with a grinder and not with a hammer trying to make a certain amount or weight of metal go to a certain length or curve specs. The second one, and the big one I want to talk about, is I've watched at least 15 years worth of cold steel's promotional material, and Lynn Thompson really likes Victorian Sabre. Now, Victorian Sabre, and this is going to be the American West to World War I-ish era. It is the dying age of the sword, and it's primarily used by cavalry and officers and horseback. And what they start doing is, instead of holding it a hammer grip up here, real strong grip, they start holding lower, which is why you see these swells down here. See how much space. Instead of this, you have this gap right here, and they bring their thumb up to here. Now this gives you a lot of control on the tip versus with the hammer grip, but you kind of, this doesn't structurally work that way. You get some really strong motions that you can't push against very easy, but you don't get the good cuts. You get these circular round motions, which is fine if you've got a horse head that you're cutting around, and you can do that with this. This, with the hammer grip, it's faster. I can make these shorter close end cuts at much better angles. And the primary motion for a cavalryman is to come in on his horse sideways. He puts his thumb up with the thumb out, puts his arm up like this, and then he thrusts in at an opponent. Even with this curved sword, the primary motion is the thrust, followed by the broad sweep at infantrymen at about your knee height. Just make this long reaping stroke. And I've watched a lot of their stuff, and Lynn Thompson really likes to hold his hand like this, and he really likes to make these thrusting motions with his thumb out. And all of that leads to wanting a balance that's further forward, because originally cavalry swords are like, you know, this much longer than these on top of that, so it's got more leverage to pull the tip down. And I think that's going to be affecting it, because he doesn't build them, cold steel doesn't design the swords around historical usage with their own fighting style. They based them around what they're familiar with, what tools they have, and their own preferences. And I would also add that perhaps their penchant for demonstration on cutting tests and stuff like that also lends them to tend to make cutting swords instead of more balanced swords that don't perform as visually spectacularly but are better to fight with. That's my theories on the subject. I'd be happy to hash it out with anybody else who has an opinion. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Till next time, this is Red Wolf signing off. Y'all keep up the good fight.